Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Ghostbusters Answer the Call, or Ghostbusters 2016, or Ghostbusters to some people in some places of the world. Of course, immediately, when I go into this film, a lot of people will be like, man, this was like a controversial film. Everybody was up in arms because of XYZ thing. And for me, I honestly had, when I originally had this to be a thing to come out, I was like, I have absolutely no interest in ever seeing this film. But I coincidentally found myself a copy of this film. So I'm like, okay, might as well just watch it. And so when I originally saw this film, I think if you were to originally have my opinion about this film and have it now, wildly two different things. I think I would be heavily harsh on this film just because there was a lot of stuff that came out around that time that I would have to just really forcibly compare this to. Or really, I would spend too much time comparing this to the original two films. But now we have things like Afterlife that came out. And so now I'm just like, okay, let's go back to this movie and probably more than likely have to compare it to Afterlife just because, this is a more current thing of Ghostbusters, technically. It may not be in the continuity of the two other films. It's pretty much its own thing. But so, how do I feel about this Ghostbusters film? Because this is probably going to take a while for the cryptic-like sense, the teeing up version, and so on and so forth. So, this is another Ghostbusters origin story, and really, for this film, to me, my negative thing about this movie is that we consistently don't have cosmetically pleasing equipment. The Ecto-1 in this movie isn't cosmetically as appealing as the original. Plus, also, I'm not sure how they came to the exact same conclusion of calling this Ecto-1. They probably could have called it anything else. As well as, we have to go through and rename these people. We have to go through and come up with the logo, which I don't even think in the original... in the original films, that wasn't to be the end-all be-all of them desperately trying to come up with some kind of name. And it seems like they had to, desperately keep trying to not name themselves Ghostbusters or come up with even goofier logos. And I think there was a lot of times where this movie themselves were hey, don't go and don't read the negative comments of things. Don't go and have there be an obvious logo that we should go and do, the whole ghost with boobs and oh, should we have to drastically change even the logo because it's now a female cast and now we have to joke around about it. I can see there are some points where some male audience members could get offended about this film, because there are certain points where we have the male people, if they're not the villains, they're kind of these goofy idiot guys. And we also have it where Rowan, who is to of course mention that basically all of the evilish ghost spirits are mostly dudes. And I'm like, why did we have to have that line? Why do we have to have that approach in this film? And there is that whole Ken doll joke but it's to make fun of like stupid guys that are to be presented in this film. We do have like this uh we do have this like, if it's not really just a straight up like real Ghostbusters adaptation with this movie, we do have just like this goofy like thing of these characters. And I took a lot of references of the ghosts looking very much like the live action Scooby-Doo ghosts in those movies, where I'm like, it looks a lot of the same. But even with like Afterlife, it started to at some point where you can kind of pull apart some of those ghosts and be like, yeah, that looks just like a thing that you would probably see on a live action Scooby Doo thing. Like, I don't know, I just think that they can't do like a normal. They can't do like a normal ghost anymore. Like, it always has to come from like that Scooby Doo live action movie of how to do ghosts now. I don't get it. It is what it is for those movies. So, but the positives about this movie. The positives about this movie, and this may come to some comparisons of Afterlife. This movie doesn't waste your time. This movie is to also be that we have a escalation of story where we have the Ghostbuster doing a lot of odd jobs and then getting to the main villain and then going in and like having this huge onslaught of them having to go and take all of these ghosts throughout this town, which I think that straight up is probably the best part of this movie, where we have them kind of going into this town and using these, like, yeah, I'll say it, like, there's some goofy, weird, like, weapons that they use towards the end of this film where they are to try and, instead of just going and blasting them and trapping them, of course, we then just have to turn around and, like, kind of vaporize the ghosts and so on and so forth. But here's also another interesting thing. We also have our villain, who is Ronan, in this movie. Even though it might feel like he doesn't really exist in this film, or he doesn't exist enough in this film, to have him be like going and trying to counterbalance what the Ghostbusters are doing. I kind of do like the fact that Ronan is actually trying to do the very exact similar thing as to the Ghostbusters, but he, of course, is to try to bust all these ghosts out instead of keeping them all in. Like, he is to have this device that is to be this kind of portal or weaponizing like thing, and he has these God, what are they called? These little things that look like traps, but are to be kind of like the reverse kind of thing, where it's to be traps that are to release out this ghost to then, like, I would say that this feels very much like these traps kind of feel like mood slime to me, where it's like you're going and sprinkling mood slime in this area, and that is to create this ghost for this environment, which, it's a trap still, but in my mind, I'm like, why is it that this like ghost was like perfectly put for this environment? And plus, also, like, the whole, like, the actual subway ghost doesn't actually make sense for the subway ghost. Like, they have to actually have this whole backstory about that this subway used to be some kind of prison and so on and so forth to justify the ghost in the subway station. Doesn't quite make sense in this film. But we open this movie and it feels like a Ghostbusters like opening. In the opening of Afterlife, I can't really quite, like, even in two like showcasings of it, I could probably say that if there were to have been a new person that didn't know much about Ghostbusters, in the opening sequence of this movie, they wouldn't entirely know what exactly is going on here in the opening of the film. In the opening of this film, it just kind of sets up that this is just to be like the librarian like scene from the original film, that this is just going to be the Ghostbusters' job in this film to correct this whole thing, which they don't even actually do. They don't even actually correct the whole Aldridge thing. I'll admit that, but so. But with that said, like, I liked this movie. I actually liked it way better than I did X amount of years ago. Like, I would say that I'd be fine with going through, and if I were to watch the two other Ghostbusters, I would watch this one also. And maybe not Afterlife. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what a couple of years will do. If I'll actually enjoy that movie more, or I'll just want to just consistently skip on to the brand new product of whatever is going to come after that, because it seems like they're making their money back on that movie. Because I think they were to have made this movie was supposedly, I guess, 75 million, and they have not already reached like 60 million already. So, like, I guess they're projected to like make their money back for this film, and so everybody is technically pleased about this movie compared to this film, where like some people were saying like, hey, I would be okay if they kept going on in this universe, but like the movie just bombed, and so they were just like, yeah, well, like, let's take some more years and try to figure out how to make another one of these. And like to the point to where we're going to start running out of certain characters, or certain characters are going to get far too old, and plus also you have COVID to be in the mix there. But anyways, so my overall grading of this movie is like, if you hated it before and it's been a while since you've seen it, check it out now. Some people may still have that same kind of feeling. This movie is kind of like the SNL edition of Ghostbusters, because we have too many people seemingly from SNL in this movie, and there is this kind of SNL flavor or delivery to this film. But again, I can actually like this approach to this Ghostbusters movie. I can actually like it. Like, I would say that, like, I would have, like, I think a movie like this makes me really want there to be a Ghostbusters TV show out there that has nothing to do with any of the Universal things, and has nothing to do, like, is its completely own 100% thing, and it's a show, and like, we don't have to go through the Ghostbusters logo, we don't have to go through how they came up with anything. Just have them go out and just be their own thing. And I think a TV show honestly would work. Like, I know a lot of people immediately just say, it's like, well, they had two cartoons, like, what is that? I'm like, well, like, yeah, like, but like, I think you can do a live action possible version of this, of Ghostbusters, or even just an animated movie, or just really just another medium somehow, and I think it would work. Like, if you have like a possible like Spider-Verse or something of like of Ghostbusters, like, you could, as a, like, I mean, an animated movie, not bring everything back that pretty much didn't work and just be like, hey, Spider-Verse. No, I'm just saying, like, an animated movie that it's be this big massive thing. So with that said, that's all I think that I wanted to say about Ghostbusters answer the call in a cryptic like sense. Uh, so I can say I liked this movie. I enjoyed this film. It's a fun film. Would I go out of my way to say that it's a 100% like go watch it? It's a great film. No, it's not. It's not a great film. It's just a good enough film to keep my interest. Like there's parts about it where they hold on to jokes for way too long, and there is a lot of them like trying to forcefully not be like the original Ghostbusters so much that it's kind of painful that they have to try to avoid as much as possible. No, we don't want to be anything like them. Why? What's like what's the problem with that? The fighting of the name thing, the fighting of the like numerous other things, the logo, the whatever, and like trying not to be those kinds of things. So with that said, let's just go into this movie. I enjoyed it, like, and there might be something about it somewhere that people may still not like about it, or might just be like, that, no, I hate this movie because it says this and this and this. I'm like, well, like, forgive it for that. Like, really, for this movie, like, people could still just be hurt about this movie just because of what it was to have been controversially. Whatever. Let's go into this movie. Let's go into that double five, because it's otherwise that time again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So, the beginning of this film, we have the Aldridge Mansion Museum. And so we have a tour guide named Garrett, who, funny enough, there was a extreme Ghostbuster. His name was Garrett, and I wonder if that's anywhere where they pulled that from. Probably not, because Garrett isn't going to be a Ghostbuster in this film. I guess it was probably just a random name that they chose. So Garrett is to, of course, go through this mansion museum and is to go on and talk about a family called the Aldridges, where it seems that this mansion is to only be famous, I guess, because there had been a number of murders that had been done by a girl named Gertrude. Evidently, Gertrude was to have had, I think her father mentioned that that God must have been drunk the day that Gertrude was to get her personality. And so we have Garrett, who is to say all these vicious claims about this family and so on and so forth, as a candlestick is to fall over and everybody's like, oh, candlestick. Which we find out that Garrett had that trick implanted upon. And so we see him kind of going and playing with the trick as the tour is to be over. So Garrett goes and explains this history of these characters, and that's what kind of gets me to just be like, man, I wish that we could just, like, Ghostbusters show would be so great to just have, like, them build up these certain kind of stories, to just have, like, if one episode was really just focused, or if a lot of these episodes were just focused on them just busting a ghost, and there was this not huge big event that was to build up to that, like, they could honestly just have the last episode be one big hurrah of a thing, but everything else could just be one busting ghost thing after another, and then you could just have a lot of other, like, side stories about how they, like, felt about their day or whatever. Maybe they learned something. But yeah, so Garrett does this tour, and so he is to go on, and we have this ruined thing that has been released upon this this mansion, And so Garrett is to hear a noise that he is to all of a sudden start to follow, and so he heads down this flight of stairs to all of a sudden have some slime of sorts, kind of covering his feet, and he's like, oh, and so all of a sudden, we have, of course, Gertrude, who is to appear and frighten Garrett to the point of him trying to run back up these stairs, but the stairs break. And so Garrett is like, he's all scared. And then that's when, of course, they crack open the intro of the movie, Ghostbusters, Busted Makes Me Feel Good, all the, like, we have, of course, Fallout had their rendition of, like, this song. And I think when I originally heard it, I was just like, you know what? Like, this is so goofy. Like, why couldn't they have gone with the original tune? But actually hearing it in this movie, I like a variation that they have on it. I don't have a problem with it. Like, I think it was just like a knee-jerk thing. Just like, dude, it's a song. It's a newer flavor of it. And maybe even really looking at it, like, it does actually sound good. Like, it is an okay sounding song. So let's go on to, of course, we have in the very beginning of this movie, we have Aaron, who is to be going and working at some school, desperately trying to get tenure. And so it seems that she's to be under scrutiny from a guy named Harold Fillmore, who is to be yay or naying this girl's tenure. All of a sudden, Erin is to just try to Google herself and try to see if there's anything out there that could go on and possibly have this guy Harold go on to just like, no, I don't think so. Like, I don't think that this is right for you. And so it seems that Erin is just scraping through her life, trying to find some little something that is going to conflict with her getting tenure. And so all of a sudden we just see randomly on some Amazon that there, of course, is to be this thing on Amazon called Ghosts from Our Past that, of course, Yates is selling on Amazon. And so the reason for that is because Ed Mulgrave is to desperately come to Erin Gilbert before she is to have her big, her big class. And so Ed is to desperately ask this woman, like, please, like, I've seen your book, the Ghosts of the Past, or Ghosts of Our Past, and I'm desperately hoping that you can help me with my ghost situation. Because, like, what did this guy go into a Barnes and Noble, like, trying to figure out, like, ghosts for dummies? Like, how to, like, get rid of your paranormal for dummies? Like, and he just found this book, and he's like, oh, she's a... Like, he couldn't have gone through the yellow pages or whatever. like, he just randomly went into some author's place and just like, hey, book, you. This seems so weird. This seems so goofy to have this guy just randomly, like, think that he can search for answers in this one woman where, like, a book isn't always necessarily deadly accurate. And why all of a sudden would you rely on this book to think that, okay, like, now we can really and truly, like, have this person just take care of this problem? No, she's just going through the science of a ghost. Like, she's not saying that she has equipment on her. She's not nothing. Like, we even had, like, Egon, who, like, put together a book in, like, Extreme Ghostbusters, and you see it in the very opening pilot episode, where Kylie is like thumbing through it and she's like, yeah, like, and like they're saying like, man, like this book, like it sounds like he really knows what he's talking about because he does. So Erin is to now go into her computer and is to see this book. And so we have Harold coming in and is to just go and like, is like, hey, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? Erin's trying to hide the fact this Amazon book so that way Harold won't find out about it. Harold walks off for us to see a Harold Ramis freaking bust. Yeah, that beautiful man. It's true. Uh, Let me know how you felt about like just them having just some statue of Harold Ramis in this film. Like a lot of people are just like, "Hey, I'm fine with it because like we do get that afterlife thing that people might like." And so yeah. So or people may feel wishy-washy about it, whatever you want to approach or whatever and do and so on and so forth. So we of course have Aaron going to Abby, and Abby is to have this guy delivering to her named Benny, delivering these wontons. And this joke, I think, goes on far too long. But not only that, they like doubled down on the joke. And so it just seems like this consistent thing about this whole wonton joke, where Abby is to consistently call these people like, hey, I didn't get enough wontons, or hey, I got half of one, or hey, I got this or that. Or that. So Aaron is to go to Abby to try to get this book removed off of Amazon. And so Abby, of course, is to meet the very awkward Jillian Holzerman. And like I can like, and again I could say words like awkward for Jillian. Like there's something about her where like I can like what she brings to the table with this character. It's kind of this like fun but cringe but awkward character, and you kind of get some like bits and pieces and whatever. Like, but at least this character doesn't feel like stupid. Like this girl is just to be presented in here because she's basically just gadget girl. And when they finally do get an actual proton pack like equipment, then she busts out all these like weird, goofy, uh, like uh, like gadgetries. Which I'm not gonna go in depth about the whole like gadgetry thing. Like I'm gonna go and like compare some certain things to whatever these gadgets are, but I'm not gonna actually say like what every single one of these names are and whatever. They'll be reused in the later part of the film because like this is like a James Bond kind of thing where they have to use every new thing that they present in this movie, or otherwise it's just a waste of resources. So Aaron is to go on and talk to Abby about this book. And so Abby's just like, well, how does anybody know about this book? And so Aaron is to tell her why, like, she is to have found out that this book was still in Amazon. And so Abby's like, well, hey, that sounds like a case that we can be a part of. And I want you to take me to this case, and I will take the book down or off of Amazon. So now we have, of course, Jillian, Aaron, and Abby all going to this mansion museum. And so it is kind of funny because Aaron, when she is to be at this school, she is to be wearing this kind of Colonel Sanders like get up weirdly. And we have Harold coming in and mentioning how like seductive she looks. I'm just like, how is this even like a thing that like I guess this woman just has to weirdly just somehow come off as seductive when she's like wearing the most clothes that she could possibly ever wear. But like that's just me, I guess. So we have these three go off to make their way to this museum, and so the two guys are kind of mentioning what they experienced in there, and like Garrett is kind of mentioning what he experienced in there, and so on and so forth. And so we push on to have these three go in there, and so of course they end up going and finding Gertrude, and Abby is coming in there with a PKE meter that she doesn't even realize how it actually works. Because it starts to go haywire, it starts to go amok, and she's like, I didn't even realize it even did that kind of thing. And so Gertrude is there, and so we kind of have Aaron doing this kind of Ray scenario where it's like, go get him, Ray, where Aaron is going in there and she's going and trying to talk to it and just be like, hey, like, yeah, like, Gertrude, nice name, kind of. So that is to all of a sudden lead to Gertrude just power vomiting all over Aaron, and they kept the video and they posted it onto YouTube. And so when Aaron is to be done with this whole thing that they're doing, and Aaron's like, oh my god, ghosts are real. Because supposedly Aaron is to have this whole backstory about when she was a child, how like a ghost had affected her life. And so much so that when she was young, she was called this ghost girl, and someone eventually is to find out about that, and they heckle her about it, like, oh, you're a ghost girl. And so Aaron pops this guy in the face for calling her that. And excuse me. And so on the newspapers it just plastered Nosebuster. I'm like, okay, like, why did we even have to go into that route of things? Like, I didn't really get that. I didn't really understand it. So we also have Bill Murray in this movie playing Martin Heiss, or Heiss? Martin Heiss? Heiss? I'm going to say Heiss. And Martin is to, once the Ghostbusters legitimately get going and they're to be busting goats, we have Bill Murray coming in trying to say that these people, like, he's basically the Walter Peck in this movie, where he used to say, like, oh no, like, this is all false, this is all phony, and there's no way that these gals can actually be doing this. I'm like, is this guy just some expert of sorts that is to just kind of weigh in on this and just be like, there's no way that he can get that kind of equipment together? Or is it just some random person who is to be Bill Murray's character just spouting out of like some nonsense and just wanting to prove that like without any real evidence about him going into any, like, going with them on any of their cases or anything like that, like really going and doing some legitimate legwork on this to just be like, oh yeah, like, I saw them in action and none of this is true. Like, have him come in with some kind of camera crew recording all this and have his trusted people record all these events. To see if there is any kind of false or inaccurate things going on here. But, like, I'm taking too much time for this. So we have Aaron who comes back to Fillmore, and Fillmore is to immediately have this video on screen to just be like, okay, Aaron, you're fired. You're fired. Trump style. You're fired. So Aaron is to immediately get fired, and she's to walk out of this place. And it seemed that Aaron was to have this boyfriend, and she was like locking lips with him and whatever. But then all of a sudden, when she is to go out of this place. Like, this guy basically rejects her, and it's like, no, 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 no. Like, I'm not going to be seen with you in this hallway. Aaron has to come up with several lies about why, like, she's not getting canned here. Like, Aaron is to mention that there was like asbestos in her room, or that she's lifting weights, or she likes to just carry her plant around, or some other kind of bullshit. Like, just coming up with any kind of random things. Uh, Besides, like, hey guys, I didn't get fired. Like, if this looks like it's not what it is. I'm just moving. Like, I'm just going somewhere else. So we have Aaron going to Abby, and so Abby is just like, well, maybe we can afford having you on with us, and so maybe we can see if the dean is going to give us any more funding to afford you to work with us. And so all of a sudden, Abby and Jillian and Aaron are to go to this dean, and this dean is like, I don't even know how you're actually still here. like, like, I don't even know how you've been still getting checks this whole time, because uh like your studies are like unfruitful. Like, there's like, this is a giant waste of time. And so then we have this guy go off on this rampage of just giving these girls the finger, and it's like, oh, look, I got a bird for you. Oh, like, he has this really outstretched finger joke that just is to be way too long. But in this movie, they carry on way too long for any number of any of these jokes. And because, like, they're kind of, I guess they're really just biting for time, because as per usual, probably a number of these films, there might not have been much of a script. It just never feels like these Ghostbusters movies. Even in Afterlife, it doesn't really seem like there's legitimately a script there. I don't know what it is. Even though it seems like the movie is broken down enough, I just feel like a lot of people are just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, or they're just hiring people to improvise certain kind of scenes or whatever. Like, I don't feel like there's a legitimate I don't feel like there's legitimate stuff people are saying here, besides anything that has anything to do with science. Like, everything else is just like, hey, let's try like 5 different things and see where this goes. See where the story goes. I'm interested. So we now see Aaron, Abby, and Jillian all fired from their locations. And so I guess supposedly, Abby, I think, had stolen the equipment from that school without them realizing it. So now these people are all looking for some place to hang their hat. And so they end up, of course, going and looking for some new building. And, of course, that new building is to, of course, be, at first, the Ghostbusters firehouse. Like, or that same kind of firehouse location. And, like, the 2 other girls are like, oh my god, like a strip pole and all this other goofy stuff. And so Aaron is like, like, I don't know about this. And so we have Aaron asking this rental agent. It's like, well, like, what do you think, like, price range that this is? And so the renting agent is like, yeah, you aren't going to be able to afford this. Like, hey, like, do you have a problem with Chinese food? And so we switch to go and have these people live right above the exact same place that Abby is to order from all the time. So it seems like the top half of this restaurant is to go off and rent out its top building for these people. So instead of it being a restaurant, now it's just some like business part for this seemingly Ghostbusters. So this place, of course, is called Zoo's Authentic uh, Hong Kong food, I guess is what it's called. I'm probably just gonna call it the Chinese food place. So whenever I say that, like, it's basically what I'm gonna say here. So now let's go into the subway story. The subway story. So we transition to the Seaward Street subway station, where we have, of course, a kind of a ticket woman named Patty who is to be talking to some weird, goofy guy named Rowan. And so Patty is to be asking, like, "Hey, I wonder what train that guy is going to be going on. I'm like, the crazy train." So I know she doesn't say that, but in my mind, that's immediately what I came up with. So Patty all of a sudden is going and checking the tracks because maybe I guess someone had found some problem with some part of this subway station. And so Patty goes and investigates what, of course, is to be this disturbance or this whatever. And so Patty just thinks that it's some guy, some random guy down there, but she finds out that it's some prison ghost. That I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. I'm liking that we consistently have these kind of uh, these kind of transitional kind of stories that are just to be like, hey, the Ghostbusters are gonna get more work. Like, I think really the museum ghost kind of is to be the like librarian ghost, and so I can really just say that this prison ghost is just kind of like the uh, probably has to either be the Slimer kind of ghost, or probably even is gonna be like the one where all three of the Ghostbusters go down the subway station, because that's the perfect easy analogy or the comparison. And so they're going down this train station, and they're like, "What about like what about the traps? What about the equipment?" And so there's be the one guy that's down there when they're like, "Hey ho," like weird stun, and then the freaking like the heads on the pikes all appear, and they're like, "Oh," and then they jump off. And so then there's this big ghost train from Albany coming in and hitting Winston, and he doesn't die from it, but he gets really scared. Uh, like that could be I had to do a whole lot of prep work to say all that for no real reason. And so, like, that could be the easy comparison of why they had to do this whole train thing in this moment, this subway moment, because technically we had that whole thing before in Ghostbusters 2 with the whole train part where the the whatever train coming from Albany. I don't know why I remember that, but I've seen that movie hundreds upon hundreds of times, but I don't know the actual name, and Winston couldn't have caught the actual locomotive. And he was like, sorry, missed it. So, as he was fending for his life. So now back at the Ghostbusters headquarters, not the firehouse, because it's a Chinese food restaurant, which is like, I like that. Like, I can accept that, and plus also, like, this is a starter up business where these people don't really have like hand over fist for money, so I can understand them having having this very cheap like thing of getting this instead of getting this massive firehouse where I'm like, how do they have the money for this? Like, especially in that first one where I'm still just like, how is it that Ray, even though he put a mortgage out on his like out on a home that he was to be given, like, I don't even know how like Ray could afford that house. Like, that just seems or that firehouse, that kind of just seems like so absurd how they could have been able to afford that. And plus also, I don't understand how they could have been able to have kept that. um they must have really been jacking up the prices for every time they were to catch a ghost, because man, that's some real money you would have to make from every single bust. So, pushing on. So, we have, of course, Aaron, Yates, and Jillian, who are to, of course, be hiring a guy who is to man the phones, basically the Janine Esch-like character, who, of course, is to be Chris Hemsworth, who is to be Kevin. Let me know really in the comments below how you feel about Chris Hemsworth in this movie, how you feel about Kevin in this film. Like, some people might have different opinions about him, like, oh, like he's a moron, like, or like he might have some maybe funny moments in this here, or I think this movie is to really just showcase that Chris Hemsworth, like this is the first showcasing of Chris Hemsworth really doing comedy, and then the Thor movies started to become like comedy films and whatever, and they seem to like showcase Chris in a different light here. So whether or not people like hate this movie or whatever, like I think this overall did do a good thing for Chris Hemsworth in the end. So Kevin is to be hired on the spot because no one else is going to come to fill this position, even though already Kevin is doing a horrific job to the point at the end of the film they just want to disconnect his phone because like he's just pretty to look at, but not much else is going on there. So Kevin, when hired, is to not only mention that he is to want to bring my cat in with him, and they're like, "Oh, your cat? You want to bring your cat in?" And he's like, "No, like I want to bring my dog, who's named my cat." And like this again is another joke that stretches far too long. But not only is Kevin to go on and be the phone answering guy, then Kevin is to also be the weird logo guy, where his logos make no sense. We do have the uh, boob ghost thing where they're like, no. And then he has the hot dog hovering over a house, which like Kevin just likes that because he likes hot dogs. And so sure. And then he has like 7-Eleven, which they're like, okay, how does that even work? And plus also that's already a logo that has already been taken. He's like, oh, what a weird coincidence. Like as if they could just go and grab any logo and it doesn't really matter. Or maybe 7-Eleven was actually some sponsor weirdly for this movie. And maybe they just kind of slid it in there for them to have some kind of sponsor, just with the logo slapped on some computer screen somewhere. So, uh, so yeah, so Kevin is kind of a like he's just a guy mixed in with this group because we had Janine, who's to be the female, so we had to have a male equivalent here. But when really looking at it, like looking at like Kevin's Janine is just kind of like, man, like like we had Janine, who was kind of like, she took this job and then she regretted it, and like it seems like she was a lot like smarter than this job really, where Kevin took this job and he's a moron, honestly, and he can't even do his job properly, to where he just like messes up every single thing. And at some point when somebody is to be shouting at him through a phone, he's just like, nah, like I don't want to deal with that, like I don't know, like they'll call back if it's really important. I'm like, wow, okay. So we have Patty, who is to, of course, uh, come back to us and is to come to the Ghostbusters and is to mention that her subway station is haunted. And so now all the Ghostbusters are like, okay, great. Like, that gives us a job to do. So Patty is to kind of give us the history, or the is to be a character who is to guide these people um, into these locations. Which I'm like, you know what? Like, here's a thing that, like, I don't think we had enough in Ghostbusters, where we have the one, like, we can say that this is like clearly Winston um, here, but like we don't really have a character that is to like know not only the history but where to go about everything. Um, like that kind of feels, it's like we have Egon that has part of that, and then Winston is to of course be like the driver of things, and then like all kinds of the like Ghostbusters do have these like random stories or something like that, which I do really like. Like cue up the video game, and you can kind of see that in spades. So, but like that's a good thing about Patty, is like she's like the best of both worlds, kind of, where like she's like two people pretty much. So we have the now all four of these Ghostbusters, and now I can luckily just have to like say all four of them now and just call them Ghostbusters instead of their individual names, because I'm like, thank God. So the Ghostbusters go down to this subway station, and they conveniently are to of course see this guy who's a graffiti artist that comes up with their logo for them. And so, and it's kind of funny because the guy's like, hey, like, I do have an art show, but this is my gallery. I guess where he's like testing out like what things he can put for any number of things. So we go to this part where of course the ghost is there. And so Jillian is to have, of course, this prototype like proton pack that of course Aaron is to use. And so Aaron is to go and start blasting this ghost, and it seems that they haven't quite figured out yet how to like trap this ghost. But I think the real thing is if this proton pack is actually going to work. And Patty is to mention them, hey guys, be careful of the third rail or you're going to get shocked. So we only have a limited, like a certain amount of time before possibly another subway train comes through. And so Aaron is starting to blast, of course, this ghost. And so, like, they eventually leave because there's not much for them to do after this. There's no way to trap this ghost indefinitely. And so they're just kind of like, well, like, that was a nice test run of things. And so Patty is to now recommend to these people, like, what her, like, resume is. And then it's like, hey, I can really help you guys. And because the girls are really having a difficult time trusting Kevin to lug their equipment around. And so Patty makes the recommendation of like, hey, I'll be a Ghostbuster and I'll help you guys, I'll help you guys do whatever you guys need to do. And plus also she'll go and get them a ride, which of course is to be this very black hearse that she got from this Uncle Bill, who we find out later is to actually be Ernie Hudson. So, and weirdly we have just Jillian who goes and takes this hearse and completely transforms it into the new Ecto-1. And the funny thing about this is the original Ghostbusters Ecto-1 was, of course, to be black, and then they repainted it white. So I'm like, so they go through the exact same kind of universal thing of, like, repainting a black hearse white. Or they have to forcibly repaint the Ecto-1. And so, once Jillian is to bring back this hearse, and Patty's like, oh my god, you repainted this? And put a bunch of crap on top of it? Oh my god! And so, Patty is to say, like, my Uncle Bill's gonna kill me because this is some weird looking hearse. And so towards the end of the movie, we have Uncle Bill coming back for his hearse, and so Ernie Hudson is in this film. And so Patty just has to come up with some kind of excuse for Uncle Bill to not have his hearse. And so, like, Uncle Bill's like, well, hey, like, I need two hearses. And so, like, where is his hearse? So Patty ends up coming an excuse that, unfortunately, Uncle Bill has to buy. So we also have, of course, Jillian, who, after they've kind of tested the first prototype proton pack, now they really have to go in and test a lot of other gadgetry, like smoke bombs or ghost bombs, and like this weird ghost shredder of a thing that, or a wood chipper of a thing that is to be this, like, the ghosts are forced to come in, and when they come out through the other end of this kind of weird shredding device, they ended up like getting neutralized. And like, that's something that they talked about in the very first Ghostbusters movie, where when they when they thought Gozer, like, when they blasted her, they thought that they neutralized her. So they're kind of like thinking the same route in this movie of just like, well, why can't we just actually just neutralize a bunch of like ghosts in this fight out, instead of having to catch them all, which just seems like a very unreasonable task. Like, why can't we just come up with equipment that is to just go through and quickly just defeat all these ghosts so we can have a ton of ghosts towards the end of this film? So, like, why not just have like ghost trapped bomb things? Like, why can't we just have a a proton trapper kind of thing, or something that is to be like one stop shop kind of thing, where we go from blasting it to trapping it all in one fell swoop of a thing. Kind of like the containment unit thing on Ecto 1, which I think was the smartest thing for the video game to have put on there. Because I'm like, dang, that's actually a brilliant idea, because you basically have like them just pushing this thing into the Ecto 1, and then the Ecto 1 sucking it in and just becoming the trap, which I thought was brilliant. So now we transition on to the Mersado Hotel. And so that's when we have our villainous character, Rowan, who is to be this maintenance man of this hotel. He is to go off and is to seemingly go into one room. And here's the one thing that I want to say about this movie. There's something in my mind, or there's something about me, that is to say that there's possibly two different versions of this film. If I'm right about it, if we have a different way of approaching this movie, and I'm not talking about that, because I think there's a whole like scene at some point where Patty is to overly explain like Rowan being the villain of this story. And for some reason, for the life of me, I'm like, where is that from? Like, why is she overly explaining who Rowan is as this villain, and the connection like between like all these people within this movie? Because I guess this guy wasn't in the movie enough. I don't know. I thought it was so weird, because I think for some weird goofy reason, like it felt like in some cut of this movie that like the villain was like non-existent, and I didn't even know who the villain really was. Like, if anything, like I don't think I got like certain variations of this movie that I did now, which is kind of weird. So anyways, so we go to the Mersado Hotel, and so we have Rowan, who is to be doing this maintenance, who is to be talking to these mirrored ghosts that are trapped into these mirrors, and he has his own kind of portal slash containment unit, which he is going to bust open all of these ghosts to then have them wreaking havoc all over New York. And so Rowan is to go into this one room where supposedly there had been some slime that had gone into one person's apartment, and so she's to complain about, like, well, hey, I have slime in my room, and this is to be, of course, creating some rash. And so this woman is to pull back to show where this rash is, and we see a ghost appearing from out of her neck. And so then Rowan is to go on to ask the ghosts that are in these mirrors, well, hey, who let Phil out, or who let this one ghost out? So, so we transition, of course, here to have the Ghostbusters going to Stone Brook Theater. And so they're going to go on and deal with some gargoyle-esque looking ghost. Like, I didn't go into it to see I didn't go into Google or whatever and looked up what this thing actually was. I didn't bother. It looks like a ghost, so I'm like, I'll just leave it at that. So we go in this Stonebrook Theater with some band playing there. There isn't an actual name of this band anywhere. I think, weirdly, the lead singer of this band is to also do the voice of Slimer, and it says that in the IMDb. I'm like, that's kind of weird. So we have this Jonathan, the theater manager guy, who is to mention that he had seen this ghost and he had put out this scream that sounds very girl-like. And I'm like, this is just like the video game where we have the one Cedric Hotel guy who is to scream like a little girl, and they're like, we should go and save we should go and save that woman, and then we find out it's a man. So this ghost, of course, is to so all the Ghostbusters are going and trying to find out where this ghost actually is. And so they start looking through this whole place, and they find Patty's to find some room of mannequins, and she's like, oh man, you better not be in this room, that's such a room of horrors. And we find out one of the mannequins is actually a ghost, and so one of the mannequins is to start to follow Patty. And so Patty is to just be like, oh my god, are you the ghost? Please don't answer me. And so Patty just starts running off to make her way to the other Ghostbusters. Patty is to close the door behind her, and the mannequin busts through this door. And so the ghost is to, of course, to leave this mannequin and then make her way off to this stage where, of course, we have the Ghostbusters rushing out to then try and get to this ghost that is now out in the crowd. And so Yates and Patty are to go and try to jump into this crowd to try and go and see if they can bust this ghost. And so Yates ends up getting caught, but weirdly Patty is to be quickly dropped. And Patty, of course, goes into the well, I don't know if this is a racial thing or a female thing or whatever. So, there's some stuff where, it is, there's some comedic parts in this movie. I can get good chuckles out of this movie because it's been a while since I've seen some of this. But there's also some points where it's just why are they going into these kinds of jokes? I don't know. But anyways, so we have Patty, who is to mention, you know what, I'm tired. I want to just go home. And so all of a sudden the ghost is to appear on the shoulders of Patty. And so Patty is to just, turn around and want to go and get out of here. And they're like, Patty, like you have a, and Patty's like, I don't care what I have. And so Patty is to turn around and start like, yeah, hopefully I don't scare this ghost because she knows it's there. So they go on and they blast this ghost. They go and catch the ghost. And now everybody's like, huzzah! And I'm like, God, that ghost trap just doesn't. That ghost trap just does not look at all cosmetically like appealing whatsoever. And to the point of when Bill Murray is to see this ghost he called ghost trap, he ends up calling it a thermos. Like, oh, you guys caught this ghost in the thermos? Great. So uh so I think in this concert they end up going and injuring the lead singer. But then weirdly after like everybody's to be excited that the Ghostbusters caught this ghost, they replay the music again, I guess with the band member being injured. So all of a sudden after this we have the Ghostbusters transitioning to go on and meet Mayor Bradley and Jennifer Lynch and two Homeland Security agents called Hawkins and Rourke. And so the mayor and Jennifer are actually to support the Ghostbusters in this movie instead of doing the exact opposite, which is to imprison these people for public damage or whatever. So they're to praise the Ghostbusters, but they're gonna, of course, tell them it's like, well, like yeah, we're gonna praise you here, but we're gonna turn around and like call you frauds and like say that you're like you're doing a horrible job and whatever. Like we're just gonna badmouth you when the doors are opened, so to speak. So behind closed doors, they're gonna praise them and want to fund them and whatever. To where at the end of the movie, Lynch comes back and is like, "Hey, we're gonna fund you guys and give you this firehouse, basically, because we need to keep you guys like busting ghosts." So, like, I've had so many movies, or like even the video game, where we just kind of see that the government is funding the Ghostbusters, which makes a lot of sense. Like, when really, like, you have this one of a kind like thing, and so you would think the Ghostbusters would have like unlimited funding, or a lot of people would just be like, well, hey, like, the video game, like, how is it that like Afterlife doesn't reflect the video game? Because like they just want to have it be that it just ties into the live action universe of things. Like they're not going to go out of their way to try to tie the video game into a movie. It's just not going to happen, even though it would be great if they did, because the video game actually was basically a third movie in some way. Where a lot of people are like, oh no, Afterlife is a third movie. I'm like, no, the video game actually was the third film. The Afterlife was just something that happened. Like, so, because like the video game kind of tied in both movies and then tried to do like something new, a little bit new. So now we go and have, of course, Rowan, uh, who he is to basically be found out by the Ghostbusters of what he's doing. And so they go on to this hotel where now they find out that Rowan is to have this whole like portal containment unit like thing. And so now that leads to Rowan going on and like electrocuting himself, because he is going to eventually be a part of this plan to go off into other people's bodies and then try to do what he planned to do regardless. So the Ghostbusters were going to try and stop this guy, but he basically just stopped himself, and so they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we just easily wrap this whole case up. So So now we go on and we have, of course, the Ghostbusters going back to their headquarters. And we have Abby that goes into the bathroom. And we find out that she is to, of course, be possessed by Rowan. And so, and right before that is to happen, we have, of course, Martin coming in and wanting to, of course, like see the proof of a ghost. And they're like, well, hey, we just caught this ghost. And he's like, well, hey, like, let me see the trap. Let me see this. And they're like, well, no, like, we can't because, like, we haven't confined this ghost yet, or we haven't figured out how we're going to. And so, like, we can't actually show you this whole thing. But Erin just gets so upset that she opens this ghost, scaring Martin. And she's like, and he's like, oh, all right. So, kind of doing away with that character. So, but now Abby is to, of course, get possessed by Rowan, and she's to start going and uh, grabbing Jillian and tossing her out this, or almost tossing her out this window, like having her by the neck and then tossing her out this window. Patty's to go and grab Jillian and catch her. And then, of course, we have the moment where Patty is to slap the ghost out of Abby. And so then Rowan goes from Abby to then going into Kevin, where now Kevin is to, I guess, know how to use a motorcycle. So Rowan just drives off and just like, hey guys, catch you later, as I'm going to basically take over this town. So now we have Rowan going off and is to basically do his task that he is going to do, which is to explode this portal mirrored containment unit like thing and create this big massive explosion to where everybody's like, oh my god, what's going on there? So Aaron is to also find out that this was Owen's plan, or Rowan's plan all along, to open up this barrier between the spirit world and theirs. And so they, of course, get to this whole thing like before it's far too late. So now we transition, of course, to Kevin going on and controlling the town and making them weirdly, like, the National Guard is there, the police are all there, like everyone is weirdly there at a very quick pace, which makes no real rational sense. And so Kevin is to starting to control all these people and having them weirdly do these dance numbers, or making them stop and just kind of just like stay in one place for one absurd thing. Because I guess he is to either possess a lot of them, or he is to go on and just have the magic ability of controlling people. So, not quite sure which. So, Rowan goes off and is to set up all these ghosts for, of course, the Ghostbusters to now have to fend off of. And so when the Ghostbusters make their way back to this hotel, they find Slimer and I guess his wife. And like Slimer is to go and take the Ecto-1 with him. And so they're like, hey, like whatever that thing's doing, it's having fun. I guess because they probably couldn't have called it Slimer, or like they weren't going to have, like maybe they weren't really knowing what the heck was going to really go on there. so they like weren't going to make any kind of assumptions or whatever. Like they couldn't have called it like, hey, that green guy running off, like, because maybe it would have been blue, or maybe it would have been purple, or maybe it would have been whatever. Maybe it would have not have actually been Slimer, because like they weren't guaranteed probably where they were going to put any number of things. Hence why they have like Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in here as some weird parade float for a certain number of seconds. So, which like that is actually a pretty like fun way of just doing these big massive ghosts, where these ghostbusters are to bust them by them just being these weird goofy parade floats that make no rational sense. But anyways, so we have the ghostbusters and they're going and they're using these weapons. Like we have weirdly Jillian, who is to go and take these like proton like whip like things, and she's like whipping through all these ghosts, eliminating them, which kind of creates a pretty cool, interesting like ghost fight sequence here. Uh, we have, of course, Patty, who is to use that like ghost shredder device thing, weird goofy thing. Uh, we, I think, at one point have Aaron, who uses this ghost bomb, uh, and so on and so forth. Because like we have them using this ghost bomb before, and like it makes some pretty good damage in the into the hole and the to the alley that they're doing this experiment on. We also had, of course, when they were going to find the like the second uh, proton pack. Abby was to go and test it, and then so she ends up like shooting off like a rocket weirdly, and she's like jumping all around and stuff. Like I thought I should mention that just in case somebody's like, "Oh, you forgot about this one moment." It's a lot of like it's a lot of testing out equipment that like in all actuality like you don't really like. I can see if it's a new toy, like say that, but you don't need to really showcase a proton pack being used in a movie, because we've seen this already. We've seen it twice. But I don't know. I guess like I think this movie was also originally cut weirdly for like a 3D film, because that's what it kind of comes off as, is like some kind of 3D film. I think the variation in which that I originally saw it, I'm like, this looks like a 3D film. It doesn't look like a normal film. So and I kind of like when my first like real bite of this movie was just like, man, like this sucked because it was such like a 3D movie focused kind of thing, and I didn't like it because of that, because it just didn't feel like the story was all that good. So now we go on, and we of course have the Ghostbusters finally, after busting all these ghosts. Really kind of cool imagery here. We press on to have these Ghostbusters making their way to this hotel. And so we have this weird guy, I think his name is to be like Fred or Frank or something. Uh, like, looks like the guy from The Office. And so I'm not going to go through IMDb and look for this guy's name. But weirdly, he is to just appear because he's looking for ice. And so all of a sudden we have Rowan, who appears and is to, of course, just be like, well, hey man, like, I no longer want to be in Kevin's body because reasonably I'm getting dumber by the second. And so Kevin gets out of, or Rowan gets out of Kevin's body, and so Rowan is to now ask the people to like choose the form of their destroyer. Kind of like this whole moment is to be replayed again, where it's like, hey, choose what you want me to appear to you as. And so Patty is to say like something small and friendly, and so Rowan is just like, well, how about your Ghostbuster symbol? Like that seems like a reasonable thing to just become. Because Rowan at some point was drawing the Ghostbuster symbol, but he was drawing it evil. And so like that was foreshadowing his plan all along, was to be that logo. So which I think is also to be the interesting thing to end this movie, because when looking at it, it always bugged me that in the very beginning of the real Ghostbusters thing, when we have that big, huge, like ghost monster kind of walking into the intro of the real Ghostbusters, I'm like, why didn't they ever have that ghost be put into the show? Like, why wasn't that ever covered? And they never did. And like, it would have justified the logo, but it also would have just like, that could have, or that should have been honestly their first ghost, but they never went there. And so now that there's technically this opportunity to now do that and to justify that logo for how many ever long, like weirdly not with the original Ghostbusters, but with now this film, I'm like, you know what? Like, all right, like they try to figure out how to like do something interesting and different and whatever, even though it's a good thing that it wasn't like straight up like copy and pasting like some other films do. So, uh, something different. So, being honest, so they go on, and now their game plan, once this Rowan is kind of wreaking havoc on this town, and of course, this portal is to come out to push out all of these ghosts onto the world. They are to go on and figure out that because evidently they had given Slimer a nuclear bomb, basically a nuke, uh, by giving him basically the Ecto-1. They're like, well, maybe we can go and put together a total platonic reversal thing. I'm saying that, and I'm not knowing if I'm saying this correctly. And that whole thing of which that they said there was actually to be used in one of the other Ghostbusters movies. So I'm like, oh, okay, so they're taking something like to figure out how to beat the ghost, and they're taking it from some other film. I'm like, okay, like I'm okay with that. Like they come up with the same kind of conclusion or whatever. So their plan is to put Ecto-1 and basically blow it up, put a nuke uh, inside this thing to reverse, instead of these ghosts going out, to push them all back in, to turn this whole thing basically into a turlet and suck all these ghosts in. And so we have at one point that like the Ghostbusters are going on and trying to take down this massive no ghost. And so when he's trying to, after they go and blast the Ecto-1 and create this whole toilet bowl of a thing sucking all these ghosts back in, we have the no ghost, the massive ghost, or the ghost here, the big ghost here, trying to hold on to things to not go into this back into this portal. And so they end up having to shoot him in the twig and berries spot, basically. And I'm just like, okay, why? Like, hey, we'll loosen his grip. And I'm like, by shooting him in the nuts, basically? Like, that just seems kind of, like, inappropriate, but, like, whatever, right? I guess that's, like, supposedly a man's weakest point, maybe, and maybe it's, I don't know. So, I don't know why that was a thing that they had to do there. So, the ghost ends up losing its grip, and so he grabs Abby along the way, and so they're going, of course, down into this hole together. And so Aaron has decided to now go on and is to go in there to grab Abby and like have them, of course, be pulled back. So now at the very end of this here, we have everybody just going like, yeah, they did it, and everybody's like, yeah. And so we have both Patty and Jillian kind of doing the whole poltergeist thing where they're pulling uh, the two characters from this whole portal thing and are to now have them be here, and they're like, oh my god, you guys did it. And both Aaron and Abby um, have these really like white hair, and so Chris is to tell them, it's like, hey, you guys look a lot older. And so we have Kevin. God, what was the one thing before this where he had some joke that I actually thought was funny? Not the whole my cat one, that was stupid. Uh, but like we have him here going and having these like food that he is to weirdly just be tossed to, where Abby is to go and chuck this food, and then um, Kevin is like, "Hey, can I get a hand here?" And he gets tossed something else. He's like, so they go and they chuck that food, and then he's like, "Hey, can I get a drink?" And he has some bottled water, and so Patty's like, "Are you a wizard?" It's like, no, somebody off camera is tossing him all these things, and so they're having fun with it. So we also have where Chris or Kevin is to mention that at some point that he is to be fine if he is to actually become a Ghostbuster. Like, so much so that he's actually wearing the jumpsuit, and that's when he gets taken and is to be Rowan. And so Kevin is to, after this whole thing is over with, he is to go on and take credit for helping the Ghostbusters like defeat this villain. Because technically, it's like, hey, I helped somehow by becoming Rowan, and you guys defeated him, and and so on and so forth. So now all these girls are going off to some restaurant somewhere, and I guess they had re-dyed their hair, and they're talking about the specific color of it and how like they might have made a mistake. Uh, and Aaron is to have this kind of orange hair, which I'm like, so like, is Aaron to be depicted as some kind of Ray-like character? Kind of like in the real Ghostbusters. There were so much analogies that I wanted to just say, like, they're trying to just adapt to the real Ghostbusters cartoon, because this movie is to be very kind of like cartoony anyways. And so Abby is to have like her still black or dark hair, but she has these like white or these like blonde ash like highlights or something in the back weirdly. And so all of this is just to be here for, again, Lynch coming in, who works for the mayor, who is to tell these girls, it's like, well, hey, like, yeah, we're going to come in and we're going to fund you guys. And so, like, what do you guys want? Like, after saving the city, like, what do you guys really want? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I remember in the Ghostbusters 2, we found out, like, the Ghostbusters, like, got like sued by every county and state in New York. And so like this time around they're just like, hey, like, how can we help you? Like, how can we definitely like give you guys a permanent stay, and so on and so forth. And it's so weird to have this pulverizing thing where we have these government officials coming in and like, oh, thank you, we couldn't have done this without you, but then they go on TV and they slam them and whatever, and like just putting on this weird facade. So they immediately, of course, throw to the fact that like, hey man, like, we want this firehouse, give it to us. And so now, of course, you just kind of see them running into this firehouse, like, yeah, like, we got this thing that we basically bargained for. And so basically now we go into the cutscenes that are to have, of course, Patty go and hear this recording. And the whole thing about the early stage of this film is that Aaron was to go on and hear that recording. And so when Aaron was to go and get close to this recording, somebody farted on her, and they're like, ha 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 ha, like, yeah, we got you, because no one is supposed to bend over and try to hear this recording, because it always ends in somebody getting farted in their face. So we have Patty who's listening to this recording to all of a sudden have her say, it's like, who is Zool? Zool? Gozer? Anything that's going to be in Afterlife? Again? But a different branch of Gozer? So it's completely different, right? It has to be looks completely different. Like, all kinds of stuff is different. Not going to ruin Afterlife because technically it's still going to be a thing that is current. Like, go ahead and check out the Afterlife movie review that I've done. I guess if you want to. Like, like, you don't have to, but you could. I really appreciate it. So, and then the other goofy end credits scene, and I don't know why it seems that we have Sigourney Weaver used very sparingly in this film. Like, I don't even want to talk about, like, Dan Aykroyd being a cabbie in this film, saying, like, he's like, oh, I ain't afraid of no ghosts, and Aaron's like, well, that's a double negative as he's driving off. Because Aaron is trying to make her way down to some spot. We also have consistently where Aaron is to try to get into the pants of Kevin one way or another, to the point where Kevin is to just start to, like, it seems like he's really to get really awkward with Aaron trying so hard to get into his pants. It's ridiculous. So we have another end credit scene where, like, we have them say that, like, Kevin is going to be sworn off the phone because it's a pointless endeavor for him to even answer the phone because he always says too many things wrong, or it doesn't really matter, like, what's going on here. So anyways, so the last also bit of this movie is because I'm getting into end credits, but there's still, like, one thing to go into, that the city was to say that or support the Ghostbusters by all over certain buildings. They were to have these logos and symbols and whatever, like, I love the Ghostbusters, love ya, smooches. And so the Ghostbusters like, oh, I guess some people do actually like us. So the very last, second to last end credit scene is to have Rebecca Gorin, who is Sigourney Weaver, come into the end of this movie, and is to just be some person that Jillian is working with. And I'm just like, this is such a waste. It's probably fun for these characters to do this thing, but I just, like, when really looking at it, I'm like, this end credit scene is a waste. Because we don't do anything with it. Like, if there was to even say, like, to be continued, or next time on what, like, no. Like, so I think I'm going to get out of here. I think I'm going to go. Goodbye, everybody. I don't know how long the movie was compared to how long that I talked for, but, like, I just went for broke on this one. Hopefully you didn't like or hated this movie. Like, I could probably feel like a middle of the road kind of thing where I can like this film, even though there might be, like, little tiny there could be tiny problems with it, or there could be problems with it. I can just have fun with this movie, and that's all that really comes down to, is I can have fun with this movie. Considering this is a movie that is to be eventful, there's something going on with this movie. It doesn't feel like it's a movie that wastes your time, and so that's the end-all be-all of this movie. It's a Ghostbusters movie that is to make good on the time that you are to watch it in, and I think that's the real good thing about it. Will I probably go out of my way to ever watch this movie again? Don't know. I think really we're just kind of forced into going back into the original Ghostbusters of things, but I also wanted to cover this because this feels to just now be the only thing that I really haven't really covered, besides just reviewing, like, real Ghostbusters episodes, which maybe someday I will go and do that, but we'll see how that all breaks down. So, as if it's going to possibly ever really be relevant. I would probably like to just review certain episodes rather than the whole show all together, like I would feel like I really just want to do that, because that might be worth it to just review like either my favorite episodes or just review certain big specific ones like Citizen Ghost or possibly the Halloween Door. So if that ever happens on this channel, great. If it never does, then I could understand why. So I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.